Accelerator and CNBC TV 18 present Unlocking Potential from Startups to Corporate.
Hello and welcome to this special show brought to you by NetApp and CNBC TV 18, Unlocking Potential from Startups to Corporate. I'm your host, Paramita Chatterjee. Now, in the past decade, innovation has played a leading role in boosting India's startup ecosystem at a dizzying pace. The best entrepreneurs are continuously seeking out unmet needs and new opportunities, while large companies are expected to play an important role in the digital future. They are yet to adapt to the agility that startups bring to the process with their disruptive innovations. With many startups having the capacity now to replace existing large players in this ever-evolving business environment, it's important for large businesses to create an environment of collaborative innovation. With enhanced customer experience being of utmost priority, the time is right for captains of industry to welcome smaller yet disruptive market players to the fold and collaborate rather than compete with them in unified long-term goals. To better understand this environment, CNBC TV 18 in collaboration with NetApp have initiated this roundtable discussion on the changing paradigm of corporate innovation. And to discuss that, we have leading players from their respective fields as panelists on the show. Let me introduce them to you. Ankit Maheshwari, founding member and President Engineering India Operations at Innovasa, an enterprise software startup which focuses on the healthcare space. Monish Darda, co-founder and CTO, iCertis, a software startup which provides contract management software to enterprise businesses. Farhan Dhol, managing director, Inventors Capital Partners. And Madhurima Agarwal, director, engineering program and head NetApp, a leader in data management services. Thank you so much, gentlemen and ladies, for joining us on this very special discussion. So, now, let me start with you, Parag. And since you have a sort of a bird's eye view of the entire industry and what is happening, and Inventors has also been very a key player in enabling this bridge between startups and large corporates. Why do you think this is an important time, Parag, especially now in the post-pandemic context, to discuss and focus on collaboration between corporates and startups?
So digitization has obviously been really given a fillip by what is happening around us. And corporates today have the money. People like NetApp, Madhurima's organization, for example, are cash-rich organizations. They can afford to invest in growth. They are clearly seeing growth. But they probably can't, and this is not a point just about NetApp, but about large organizations, they probably can't move at the pace at which startups can. Startups, by definition, are very nimble. And thanks to what is happening around us, the speed at which you need to turn, need to adjust, need to pivot, is much, much faster today in the last, let's say, 15 to 18 months than it has ever been. Some of the other trends that are coming together at the same time are obviously things like development Moore's law has continued forever, but it is applied to storage, for example, in NetApp's case, or the network. The sensors have actually improved at the same pace, etc., etc. There is a cloud, there is machine learning. So there is this multitude of technologies that are also coming together into the mix, as they say beautifully. I think it is not too hot, not too cold, and that's the situation today. That's what is happening. That's why it is absolutely the right time for startups and corporates to be talking to each other.
So let me talk to the large corporate in the midst, which was once a startup in its previous times. And Madhurima, I'm coming to you with that query. How are you seeing this collaboration going forward, and how much do you think this whole pandemic has accelerated this growth? What has this meant for you as a company?
Yeah, I see it as a win-win thing, right? When it's collaboration, it benefits both parties. It's more of a symbiotic relationship that is happening here. What the pandemic has done is that it has accelerated the digital transformation, right? And folks who were thinking of digitizing, of moving forward on their tech agendas, have really pressed the accelerator on that. And with the startups and the corporates coming together, I think it is great for the ecosystem as a whole. And I say that because in the end, the startups bring the new thinking, the innovation, as Parag mentioned. But what enterprises bring is the scale, the credibility, the scale, the stability that is very important when you're looking at important systems like the banking sector, the healthcare, where any kind of a disruption in services can be fatal. So when these two join hands together and provide innovative solution which works best, I think that's the kind of reciprocal relationships we are seeing developing faster in this post-pandemic world.
So clearly, this entire collaborative process has been accelerated due to the pandemic. Manish, what has it meant, for you as a company, and what's been the trigger and what's the advantage that you see as a startup? Albeit now you've reached, unicorn status. In fact, both Manish and Ankit, both of you have reached unicorn status. So funding isn't an issue, but what does it bring to the table from a startup perspective, Manish?
I think two important things. It brings kind of the ability to accelerate innovation. I think it just any adverse event like this makes the company usually stronger, the people stronger, the team stronger. How do you kind of make the most of the resources you have? How do you plan for a lean period, which we did at the beginning of the pandemic, by the way, and that kind of helps you bring all of this together. I think it's also, in these times when your customers, your partners, analysts, they all rally around you if they see a value proposition. Especially when, for example, our pharmaceutical company customers, they were deep into this, kind of looking at the vaccine, looking at distributing the vaccine, looking at treatments for COVID. All of this actually made the demand for a stable contract lifecycle management system. Even if you think about clinical trials, for example, there's so many contracts behind it, that became a value proposition for them. And when that happens, the opportunity to partner also increases, right? So not just innovation kind of just takes a next step, but it also becomes very fast to do. And we've seen both. And actually, it's been very, very interesting as a journey. One side of it has been all the bad stuff that's happening because of the pandemic, but the second side of the coin has been that it's also accelerated the digitization, it's also accelerated the innovation, it's also accelerated all our partnerships.
Right. So clearly, a lot of opportunities for startups, but it's not always an easy journey. I mean, Ankit, for you, for instance, you're a player in the healthcare space, in fact, a dominant player in providing those healthcare solutions. And as you were telling me earlier, healthcare has been very slow to jump on to really the whole digital bandwagon. But was it easy in terms of, bringing some of or working with some of these larger corporates in terms of aligning your goals, or were there some challenges?
So I think as long as I think the aim, what we are trying to provide to all these customers is same, it becomes easier even when you are working with large corporate like over there. And for us, that piece has been easier in forms, right? Because like we all have been talking about the pandemic push, and for us, it was rather than a slump, a much more kind of need of rallying everybody together, because a lot of innovation was suddenly needed in the whole healthcare paradigm, right? From being it virtual care, having COVID command centers across health systems, and like I said, when it's healthcare, right, the stability and the uptime and the enterprise nature of the whole solution is very, very critical. And in that, working with these large organizations has only helped us, and because it has been kind of a symbiotic relationship and also something that both organizations are working towards, right? Solving the problem for the customer. And as long as the alignment is there of what we are trying to solve between the startup and the big corporate, I think it works well. And that has worked really well for us when whichever large organization that we have partnered with.
But, Parag, if I can come to you, I mean, in that sense, was the pandemic sort of a honeymoon period between large corporates and, startups to work together? Now that this is becoming really the new normal, this is life as we are going to get used to, and including for those in the business environment, what does it mean going forward?
I think the openness on both sides is required. For example, take Madhurima's role. She's been around in that role for a while. She knows the ecosystem. There are people like that in Microsoft, Google, and many other places, Amazon, and many other places. So what is happening is, because of this interaction between these large corporates and the startups, and this, as VCs, we really crave it, simply because it's when this happens that the ecosystem gets a fillip. Obviously, we also hope that some of these guys eventually acquire some of our startups or startups in the ecosystem as well, which is probably happening at a very small scale today, but will eventually go there. So this is that development that probably the Silicon Valley saw over the last 20-30 years, which is now beginning to come to India, and pandemic, as we have discussed at some length, has provided a fillip to that effort for sure.
Madhurima, how do you react to Parag's observation there, as a large corporate? I mean, you've been seeing this landscape for a while.
I think what Parag says, is what we are seeing every day. These partnerships have been existing for a while, right? I mean, for example, our program NetApp Accelerator, it's been there for 4 years now. We've completed 8 cohorts, 50 startups and all. But what has happened in the recent year and a half is that the pace of acceleration of the mergers and acquisitions and the partnerships has become much faster. For example, just in this this month itself, 3 of our startups have got acquired by other corporates, not by NetApp, but we've done our part in helping them and growing them. And that's such a pleasant thing to see. And especially in the B2B sector where we are focused on, this is something which is very evident. So I think in terms of B2B, India as an ecosystem itself has made a lot of progress. So yes, that's where we are seeing the results now.
On that note, let's take a quick break. You're watching Unlocking Potential from Startups to Corporate, brought to you by NetApp and CNBC TV18. Stay with us.
NetApp Excellerator and CNBC TV18 present Unlocking Potential from Startups to Corporate.
Welcome back to our special show, Unlocking Potential from Startups to Corporate, brought to you by NetApp and CNBC TV18. Let's continue our conversation. There have to be challenges. I mean, I'm sure not. It can't be hunky-dory for all such relationships. So, what are those challenges? And let me come to you, Manish, with that query. In terms of the roadblocks, is the fit very much dependent on the culture? Is cost a big issue? I mean, what are some of those challenges that need to be overcome and streamlined?
I think there are 2 big challenges. One rock to move is to make sure that that intention comes into the picture. Is there the right intention to kind of get to solving some of the problems that you can face together and solve together? The culture and the values is absolutely critical, because that kind of leads to openness, honesty, making sure that there is complete kind of buy-in into how you actually do business. And I think the last part of it, which kind of comes through, is to make sure that all of this can accrue to a bigger whole. 1 + 1 has to make 4, not 2, because otherwise you can do it yourself. And what is interesting also to think about is that usually what happens is when you go into a collaboration, when you go through something like a pandemic, when you're going through a change in the economy, that trust factor and how do I work with my partners, how do I innovate, it all fundamentally changes, I think, for a short while at least. And then, you probably go back to a new normal, and some of the old normal as well, but you have to make sure that those changes come in, very quickly. And that agility to make change, you have to overcome that, that mindset that precludes agility and make sure that you can move quickly on both sides. I think those are the 2 or 3 critical things. Otherwise, innovation is innovation. The humanity's been doing innovation for centuries. There's nothing new in it. It's the pace of the innovation and in the circumstances in which that innovation happens. Those are the challenges that you really need to move and overcome.
Okay, great. So, I think we've all concurred that the pandemic has clearly spurred, this entire process of collaboration. While it was already there pre-pandemic, that trend has clearly picked up steam. Parag, moving forward, how do you see the landscape changing? I mean, at Inventors, you sort of, caught the bull by the horns and you set up your entire CXO bridge, which was enabling startups to build some of these collaborations with Fortune 1000 companies. But what does the future look like from here?
So just to clarify, the first 2 funds we raised in our joint structure. Third fund onwards, we are kind of 2 separate outfits, Inventors India and Inventors Silicon Valley. But I think if I look back at the last 10 years that we were operating together, especially with relation to companies that operate on both sides, companies like iCertis or Innovace for that matter, those kind of companies, I think there were 2 differences in entrepreneurs there versus here. One was the fact that they took make versus buy decisions very, very differently. The Indian entrepreneur tended to make, I'm talking about 5, 10, 15 years back, tended to align towards make because he always thought it's cheaper to make, 6 months doesn't make too much of a difference. Time window was not important, so they tended to make it in-house versus buying it. I think that is changing today. In the US, that focus was very, very different. The second thing is, and to an extent continues to be true even today, is that we throw people at a problem. So if you look at similar companies sitting in the valley versus here, the number of employees Uber had at a point in time and Ola had were orders of magnitude different, at least one order of magnitude different. So we tended to do that. Those were the 2 key differences, and both those differences are narrowing. Because the ecosystem here is maturing. I think the first one is narrowing at a much rapid rate than the second one. But the Bangalore is becoming equally costly, for example, and people can find jobs every 3 months. So I think that will change as well.
Wow, that's quite a vision for the future. I think Parag, Ankit, and Manish, you're really drawing it up for us. Let me end with you, Madhurima. In terms of the babies, so to speak, that you nurtured have now become full-grown adults, teenagers who come with their own tantrums and demands. How do you see the future played out for in terms of this entire process of collaboration and inclusion between the 2 partners, both the startups and the large corporates?
I think I will repeat what Manish said, right? We're all dreaming bigger, and we are part of, NetApp is part of that same fabric that we weave around it. I think this collaboration is going to grow more. Times are great to be an entrepreneur, to start up if you are an existing startup, to do more. There is much more willingness in the corporate and the enterprise category to embrace this with open arms. We understand the benefits that comes from partnering, and I think overall we will continue to support this in all manner. Diversity and inclusivity is one of the other focus areas for NetApp globally, and the same is true for our program as well. We have a separate program carved out for women entrepreneurs. And this is more from an equity stake rather than equality, right? Just provide them that opportunity, the level playing field. Accelerator, and we are looking at, making sure that we are part of this golden dream that is unfolding and ensure that it comes true for our future generations. And be happy in the success of, as the babies as they grow up, just like any proud parents.
it seems like the future is indeed one of endless potential and excitement. There could be challenges in between. The challenges are always there. We're just coming out of a big one, hopefully, as far as the pandemic is concerned, and as we all adjust to this new normal. Thank you everyone for joining us on this very special session in terms of what the future holds, and it's a fascinating one full of potential when it comes to collaboration between large corporates and startups. And that brings us to the end of this special session where we spoke about unlocking potential from startups to corporates, brought to you by NetApp and CNBC TV 18. Thank you so much for watching.
NetApp Excellerator and CNBC TV 18 present Unlocking Potential from Startups to Corporate.